I'm loading my sponge, just a piece of a kitchen sponge. I've cut it up. I'm loading it in my glaze medium, and I'm going to pick up a little bit of driftwood, work it in on the palette, and following the direction of the grain of wood, I'm going to apply the driftwood to my surface. Now I've got a little piece of lifted up wood here, and I will put a bit of glue under it afterwards, but if I put the glue on it now, it's going to stop, beforehand it'll stop the stain from adhering. So instead, I do it after, because the glue will seal our wood. We don't want the wood sealed when you're staining on it ahead of time. So once I get my coat of driftwood over the entire piece, having it basically stained, you can see how what the glaze medium is doing is letting our wood grain show through. And we're wanting this to have a barn board effect to it. So I want enough of the driftwood on there that I'm not really going to see too much of the yellow from the pine. So I'm good with that. Now I'm just going to take, still picking up a little of the glaze, I'll get some neutral gray, pounce that in, and I'm just going to put it in a few places, not even, and just smear that through. I don't want to cover all of my other, I just want to have some gray streaks, some driftwood still showing. Everybody's going to have a different amount showing on their piece. There's still glaze medium in my sponge, so that's allowing the paint to go on and not be transparent. And the glaze medium is also keeping my paint wet underneath here. We do this with the stain and antiquing medium as well. Now, so I've now got that on there, and I'm going to get into a bit of charcoal gray. Charcoal's the brown tone in here, and I don't want to have as much of it. So I'm just going to be a little more cautious about how much I put on. I'm liking the look that I'm getting here. And you can see that I still see knots and wood grain through my piece. And when you have a sponge like this, I'm pressing on certain parts of my sponge to release. Where I pressed there, I got a little more, see right here. I'm pressing on that corner that I have the dark charcoal on. Maybe a bit more here. A bit here to camouflage my little busted up knot piece. And it's okay if you see scratchy lines. You like that. That gives more to the barn board wood effect. We're going to be using plaster on this board, and we're going to have a really neat effect to it. So I'm good with that. So I'll call that quits. And that's what we're going to do. Now I will take my sponge and go around my outer edge and do that as well. All right, we'll move on to the next step. Now that our piece is dried, our glaze and stain background is dried, we transfer our pattern on and base coat the horse and ears, eyes, everything like you see now. It would have been just as good not to base coat the mane, just transfer the lines on for them, because I'm going to be dry brushing right into there, and I'll have to touch those up again afterwards. So you're better off just to wait on that, and we'll go from there. So I'm going to start with the dry brush, Dome Stippler, or right now I'm using one of the, these are the Royal stencils. They're the Filbert stencil. So they kind of have a little bit more of a flat surface to start with. I'm going to begin here with Khaki Tan, and I'm just going to dry brush up the back of the ears. I'm going to come in and dry brush darker later on, but we want to let this dry first. You don't want to dry brush over. People think dry brushing doesn't have moisture in there, and even though we wipe the majority of the moisture off on our toweling, there is still quite a bit of moisture in that area. Now I'm going to switch to a bigger brush, scuff it off on my towel, and I'm going to come in along next to the mane. And this is where I say, like, I'd have been better off to just have a line drawn here rather than I'll do along next to the muzzle, to the dark part of our muzzle. Just scuff it up a little bit there. Pick up some more. Now I'm going to create the under of his jaw. And I'll just come down here a little bit. Bring up a little dark, and then all the way over here, working my way out. So this is leaving the center part kind of as if it was just regularly based. Now I will be strengthening up underneath the jaw, so under his cheek there. So I'm just going to bring the rest of this along that area as well. Now my wood marks that are in here are going to help to create another nice look to it. We are going to get scratchy marks against where our pieces separate in here. None of that really matters. Don't panic about that. That's going to add to the look of it. So we're dry brushing along there. We want to make sure we bring it up nice up his front of his snout there. And I'm going to switch back to my little one again. I want to dry brush around the eye. By doing this, it's going to push a socket in around the eye. Bring it up there. And again, like I say, we will be doing darker in here later on. So I want to let that dry. So instead, what I'll do now is I will go on and do a little bit inside of his ears. Now I've got his ears based in the black brown mix. Where did I put that? Here we go. So I've got this black brown mix. I want some neutral gray. And there again. Have myself looking for it, and it's right in front of my eyes. Okay, so I'm going to take that neutral gray and I'm going to scuff that off again, Coming with a little smaller brush, I'm going to put a little highlight dry brush along the front. I'm now going to pick up a little of the black brown, and I'm going to just scuff my way from the back into that gray. So it's going to work the two together. Watch I don't get my elbow in my palette. Now we'll be coming back and we'll be adding highlights and whatnot into there. Right now at this point, I'd like to put just a fine little bit of the black brown, so I'll just scuff that in. I've got a little more on my brush than the dry brush. I didn't scuff it off, and I'm going to kind of fill in a little more in that nostril too, make it a little darker. All right, so we will get this to dry and then we'll move on from there. So I've dried it and let it have some time in between here, and when I want to do dry brushing in a small area or a skinny area, I'm going to use my Lunar blender. So I'm going to take my Lunar blender so that I can dry brush a little bit, and I'm using burnt umber right here. And I want to keep a nice tight area around the eye, and then I'm going to come under the eyelid a bit. Come in here and darken that a bit more so you see that burnt umber tone that's in there. I'm going to bring burnt umber, bring that over here a bit, and I'm going to strengthen it up coming up the ear. I'm not looking to have too much contrast there. I just want to see a little bit of that reddish brown tone. Going in there a little bit and behind the mane. Now I do want to have, I can probably switch now. I'm going to go to the different size, and I'm going to bring a little of that burnt umber look. I don't necessarily need that to go all the way down to the muzzle, but I just want to get a little of that tone in the middle. And I'm going to put a little along the bottom of his jaw as well. Now you can never get the same amount when you're dry brushing like this, so you may get a little bit more. It's not going to matter. Don't panic about that. We want to have some nice different tones on him. It's I would never be able to do two looking the same. So I'm going to bring a little under his jaw as well. And you can see how my dry brushing picks up the wood grain. We want that. That's not a Not a problem. This is an addition. We like it. That's not too bad. I think I might like a little more coming in here. That looks not bad. And now I want to put a little bit around his snout. Coming away from the snout, I guess I should say. The muzzle. I'm going to bring a wee bit by the eye. That's looking good. Soften it coming away there. There. I'm liking that. So again, now we're going to let this dry.